Can humans live on Mars? Currently, Mars is not a hospitable environment for human life due to a number of factors. The planet's thin atmosphere provides little protection from cosmic radiation and solar wind, and the average temperature on Mars is extremely cold. The lack of a significant magnetic field on Mars means that it is not protected from solar radiation and cosmic rays. Additionally, the soil on Mars is toxic to plants and contains high levels of perchlorate, which can be harmful to humans. However, there are ongoing efforts to explore the possibility of human colonization of Mars. NASA and other space agencies are conducting research and experiments to develop technologies that could make it possible to sustain human life on Mars, such as creating habitats that provide protection from the harsh environment, generating oxygen from the carbon dioxide in the Martian atmosphere, and growing crops using hydroponic or aeroponic methods. There are also private companies, such as SpaceX, that are working towards sending humans to Mars and establishing a permanent human settlement on the planet. While it will be a significant challenge, with continued research and technological advancements, it may one day be possible for humans to live on Mars. How long would it take to travel to Mars? The duration of a trip to Mars depends on the position of Mars relative to Earth, as the distance between the two planets changes as they orbit the Sun. At their closest approach, which occurs approximately every 26 months, Mars is about 35 million miles, 56 million kilometers, from Earth. At their farthest distance, they can be over 250 million miles, 400 million kilometers, apart. The actual travel time to Mars also depends on the speed of the spacecraft, which can vary depending on the type of mission, propulsion technology, and trajectory. However, a typical journey to Mars using current technology takes between 6 to 8 months. For example, NASA's Mars InSight lander launched in May 2018 and arrived on Mars in November 2018, taking a total of approximately 6 months to travel to the planet. NASA's Perseverance rover, which launched in July 2020, arrived on Mars in February 2021, taking a total of 7 months to travel to the planet. Future missions to Mars may use more advanced propulsion systems, such as nuclear or ion engines, which could potentially reduce travel times. However, there are currently no plans to send humans to Mars until the mid-2030s. Mars is also a dynamic planet with seasons, polar ice caps, canyons, extinct volcanoes, and there is strong evidence Mars was, billions of years ago, wetter and warmer, with a thicker atmosphere. Perseverance rover, the largest, most advanced rover NASA has sent to another world, touched down on Mars on February 18, 2021, after a 203-day journey traversing 293 million miles, 472 million kilometers. The Ingenuity helicopter rode to Mars attached to the belly of Perseverance. Perseverance is one of 3 spacecraft that arrived at Mars in 2021. The Hope orbiter from the United Arab Emirates arrived on February 9, 2021. China's Tianwen-1 mission arrived on February 10, 2021, and includes an orbiter, a lander, and a rover. Europe and India also have spacecraft studying Mars from orbit. Mars was named by the ancient Romans for their god of war because its reddish color was reminiscent of blood. Other civilizations also named the planet for this attribute. For example, the Egyptians called it Erdeshir, meaning the red one. Even today, it is frequently called the red planet because iron minerals in the Martian dirt oxidize, or rust, causing the surface to look red. Scientists don't expect to find living things currently thriving on Mars. Instead, they're looking for signs of life that existed long ago, when Mars was warmer and covered with water. With a radius of 2,106 miles, 3,390 kilometers, Mars is about half the size of Earth. If Earth were the size of a nickel, Mars would be about as big as a raspberry. From an average distance of 142 million miles, 228 million kilometers, Mars is 1.5 astronomical units away from the Sun. 1 astronomical unit, abbreviated as AU, is the distance from the Sun to Earth. From this distance, it takes sunlight 13 minutes to travel from the Sun to Mars. Orbit and rotation. As Mars orbits the Sun, it completes one rotation every 24.6 hours, which is very similar to one day on Earth, 23.9 hours. Martian days are called sols, short for solar day. A year on Mars lasts 669.6 sols, which is the same as 687 Earth days. Mars' axis of rotation is tilted 25 degrees with respect to the plane of its orbit around the Sun. This is another similarity with Earth, which has an axial tilt of 23.4 degrees. Like Earth, Mars has distinct seasons, but they last longer than seasons here on Earth since Mars takes longer to orbit the Sun, because it's farther away. And while here on Earth the seasons are evenly spread over the year, lasting 3 months, or 1/4 of a year, on Mars the seasons vary in length, because of Mars' elliptical, egg-shaped orbit around the Sun. Spring in the northern hemisphere, autumn in the southern, is the longest season at 194 sols. Autumn in the northern hemisphere, spring in the southern, is the shortest at 142 days. Mars has 2 small moons, Phobos and Deimos, that may be captured asteroids. They're potato-shaped because they have too little mass for gravity to make them spherical. The moons get their names from the horses that pulled the chariot of the Greek god of war, Ares. Phobos, the innermost and larger moon, is heavily cratered, with deep grooves on its surface. It is slowly moving towards Mars and will crash into the planet or break apart in about 50 million years. Deimos is about half as big as Phobos and orbits 2.5 times farther away from Mars. Oddly shaped Deimos is covered in loose dirt that often fills the craters on its surface, making it appear smoother than pockmarked Phobos. Mars has no rings. However, in 50 million years, when Phobos crashes into Mars or breaks apart, it could create a dusty ring around the red planet. When the solar system settled into its current layout about 4.5 billion years ago, Mars formed when gravity pulled swirling gas and dust in to become the 4th planet from the Sun. Mars is about half the size of Earth, and like its fellow terrestrial planets, it has a central core, a rocky mantle, and a solid crust. Mars has a dense core at its center between 930 and 1,300 miles, 1,500 to 2,100 kilometers, in radius. It's made of iron, nickel, and sulfur. Surrounding the core is a rocky mantle between 770 and 1,170 miles, 1,240 to 1,880 kilometers, thick, and above that, a crust made of iron, magnesium, aluminum, calcium, and potassium. This crust is between 6 and 30 miles, 10 to 50 kilometers, deep. The red planet is actually many colors. At the surface, we see colors such as brown, gold, and tan. The reason Mars looks reddish is due to oxidization, or rusting, of iron in the rocks, regolith, Martian soil, and dust of Mars. This dust gets kicked up into the atmosphere and from a distance makes the planet appear mostly red. Interestingly, while Mars is about half the diameter of Earth, its surface has nearly the same area as Earth's dry land. Its volcanoes, impact craters, crustal movement, and atmospheric conditions such as dust storms have altered the landscape of Mars over many years, creating some of the solar system's most interesting topographical features. A large canyon system called Valles Marineris is long enough to stretch from California to New York, more than 3,000 miles, 4,800 kilometers. This Martian canyon is 200 miles, 320 kilometers, at its widest and 4.3 miles, 7 kilometers, at its deepest. That's about 10 times the size of Earth's Grand Canyon. Mars is home to the largest volcano in the solar system, Olympus Mons. It's 3 times taller than Earth's Mount Everest with a base the size of the state of New Mexico. Mars appears to have had a watery past, with ancient river-valley networks, deltas, and lakebeds, as well as rocks and minerals on the surface that could only have formed in liquid water. Some features suggest that Mars experienced huge floods about 3.5 billion years ago. There is water on Mars today, but the Martian atmosphere is too thin for liquid water to exist for long on the surface. Today, water on Mars is found in the form of water ice just under the surface in the polar regions as well as in briny, salty water, which seasonally flows down some hillsides and crater walls. Mars has a thin atmosphere made up mostly of carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and argon gases. To our eyes, the sky would be hazy and red because of suspended dust instead of the familiar blue tint we see on Earth. Mars' sparse atmosphere doesn't offer much protection from impacts by such objects as meteorites, asteroids, and comets. The temperature on Mars can be as high as 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 degrees Celsius, or as low as about minus 225 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 153 degrees Celsius. And because the atmosphere is so thin, heat from the sun easily escapes this planet. If you were to stand on the surface of Mars on the equator at noon, it would feel like spring at your feet, 75 degrees Fahrenheit or 24 degrees Celsius, and winter at your head, 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius. Occasionally, winds on Mars are strong enough to create dust storms that cover much of the planet. After such storms, it can be months before all of the dust settles. Mars has no global magnetic field today, but areas of the Martian crust in the southern hemisphere are highly magnetized, indicating traces of a magnetic field from 4 billion years ago.